Chapter 8 Replay Vintage. The bell jangled as Delia pushed open the doors to Replay Vintage. Her eyes swept over the store, making her cringe. Dust swirled in the air, catching the light. She inhaled the stench of mothballs, mildew, and decay, and probably other things she didn't want to imagine. The shopkeeper looked up from the register, one of those antique ones with real buttons. She had short white hair dyed with hot pink streaks, making her look both old and young at the same time. She also wore vintage clothes and sported a pair of thick black rimmed glasses that made her look super hip in an alternative sort of way. When she saw Delia, she broke into a warm smile. "Well, dear, hello there," she said. "Let me know if you need any help." I'm looking for the coats," Delia said, feeling self-conscious. This was the last place where she wanted to be shopping. "Oh, yes, it's getting colder," the shopkeeper said with a warm smile. "Back left corner. We've got quite a fine collection. They'll keep you warm." Delia headed for the back corner, passing by the used kitchenware, vintage glasses, and bins of dog-eared books turning brown from age. The store was packed floor to ceiling with shelves and racks stuffed with unwanted things. All this junk that somebody got rid of. She imagined their owner selling it here for a little extra cash, or simply depositing it in the donation bins out front, happy to be rid of it. Whose lives had these objects been discarded from? What was their story? It was sort of fascinating, but also gross. Delia wanted new things, not used ones. She started flipping through the coats crammed into the racks, searching for something that might pass as fashionable, or at least not hideous. The tiniest part of her held out hope that she might even stumble upon a rare designer find, something Harper couldn't tease her about. Her mission was futile. Every coat was puffy and ugly. In short, practical, like her mom wanted her to buy. Was it her imagination, or was each coat uglier than the one that came before it? Nothing even remotely designer appeared on these racks, like the coats that the mannequins modeled in the glam storefronts on Michigan Avenue, let alone something from House of DeVille. Of course not, Delia thought. Nobody who owned that stuff wanted to get rid of it. These were things that nobody wanted, left here so some poor girl like her could find them. If being taunted for her faux boots wasn't bad enough, wait until she showed up at school in one of these monstrosities. I wouldn't be caught dead in that coat. She imagined Harper sane, making her wince and contemplate what illnesses she could fake to get out of school tomorrow. Measles, mumps, malaria. All the scary M ones flashed through her head, though she wasn't sure of the exact symptoms of any of them. But her mom would never fall for it. She had incredible fake sickness radar. She was basically a human lie detector. Delia felt sorry for any witnesses that would have to be interrogated by her mother on the witness stand one day once she graduated and became an attorney. They didn't stand a chance. Delia pulled a puffy coat off the rack, checking the tag. It was used, but at least it had a decent name brand from an outdoor company. Not that it qualified as high fashion, and the price came in just under her gift card amount. She turned to head toward the register when suddenly she bumped into a mannequin shoved in the back of the store. The expressionless plastic face glared at her with empty eyes. Delia jumped back in alarm. But it was just a mannequin. It wasn't alive. It couldn't hurt her. "I'd like to buy this coat," Delia said, sliding the coat onto the counter, along with the gift card from her mother. "And I'd like to donate my old one," her mother had reminded her before school to do so. The shopkeeper scooped the new coat up, feeling how soft it was. "Oh, what a beautiful coat," she said in admiration. "Hard to believe somebody didn't want it." but I guess their loss is your gain. Delia felt a rush of humiliation. The coat was ugly. It wasn't what she wanted. She remembered all the glamorous displays on Michigan Avenue, desperately wishing she could afford something from House of DeVille, or basically any other store on the street. But that was impossible. Wow, and just under my gift card amount, the shopkeeper said obliviously, beaming at Delia. She rang it up. Guess it must be your lucky day. Yes, I'm so lucky, Delia grumbled. Are you friends with that boy Grant? The shopkeeper asked. Saw you out front with him. He's in here about every week asking if any new vinyl came in. He practically keeps my little shop in business, I swear. Yeah. He's pretty cool, Delia managed. We go to school together. He's a good guy. I'm glad you're friends with him, the shopkeeper said. He's been shopping here since he was a kid. She slid the coat along with the receipt into a Replay vintage paper bag, then handed Delia a handful of loose change. There's the difference, the shopkeeper said. Stay warm out there. Gonna be a tough winter, I hear. Forecasts are calling for a blizzard later this week. Thank you. I will. Delia accepted the bag, then walked out of the store feeling defeated. If her boots had gotten her teased, this ugly puffy coat wasn't going to help matters. In fact, it would probably make them worse. Harper's dare to show up in House of DeVille was still fresh in her mind. The walk to the door seemed to take forever, even though it was only a few seconds. Delia put her hand on the doorknob, then glanced back into the store, toward the mannequin she'd bumped into. The mannequin's eyes seemed to lock onto her. Its blank stare sent a shudder up her spine. Delia ducked out into the cold. The sun was setting fast, casting the alley into darkness. Her breath puffed out, freezing in the air. She pulled on her new coat and immediately felt warmer. But then she frowned when she caught her reflection in the window. It looked hideous, shaping her body into a fluffy bob. She turned toward the street, but then hesitated. The last thing she wanted was to run into Harper and her friends again on the way back, carrying the Replay vintage bag and wearing this ugly thing. Instead of tramping down Michigan Avenue, Delia cut through the back alleys that wound behind the designer shops. She passed behind the House of DeVille store, marked by a small sign above the delivery door out back. Then she saw something out of the corner of her eye that made her freeze. She skidded to a halt, kicking up gravel. Her eyes widened. It couldn't be. Hanging on a lone mannequin in the alley right next to the dumpster was a coat. And not just any coat. It looked like the House of DeVille black and white color block faux fur coat. The famous, iconic one worn by the mysterious designer who had founded the fashion line. But that was impossible. According to the lure that she'd read on their profile page, only one coat was ever made, making it priceless beyond all measure. The color block coat in the window out front was longer and cut differently from the iconic one, but this looked just like the original. It had to be a fake. Maybe they were starting to produce copies of the iconic coat? Delia glanced around to make sure nobody was watching, but the alley was strangely deserted. She approached the mannequin and peeled the coat back from the neck. As soon as her head brushed the collar, she felt how incredibly soft it was, like nothing she'd ever felt before. Her heart pounded as she checked the label by the neckline. House of DeVille, Cruella coat. The words stared back at her. The label was even stitched from the fine golden thread, making everything about the coat scream elegance and glamour and high fashion. This was the #Cruella coat. How could something this rare and precious have ended up in the alley? Were they planning to throw it out? Why was it here next to the dumpster? With her heart racing, and even though she knew it was wrong, Delia peeled the coat all the way off the mannequin, stripping it from the stiff plastic arms. She just wanted to feel what it was like to wear something like this for once. That was all. I'll put it right back, she promised herself. She slipped out of the puffer coat and draped it over the mannequin. Then she slid her arms through the Corella's coat sleeves, pulling it over her shoulders. The coat seemed to settle in place, gripping her body like it belonged to her already. It's like it was made for me, Delia thought, in awe that it fit so perfectly. She spun around in the alley. As the coat swirled around her body, she found herself falling in love with it. She knew she should put it back. Someone could walk out of the back door of the store and down the alley and catch her at any moment. But she simply couldn't do it. It was too perfect. It was like everything she'd ever dreamed of. And there was more to it. Harper's dare to show up at school tomorrow in House of DeVille echoed through her head. Well, now she could show them all. This was exactly what she needed to impress Harper and fit in at her new school. Not to mention it was perfect for picture day, which was only a few days away. She could always return it later, right? Plus, she left it out here. Plus, they left it out here by the dumpster. It was practically like it had been abandoned, even like they were going to throw it out. At least that's what she told herself. She was good at putting together convincing arguments, a useful skill she had learned from her mother. She slid the puffer coat, the one that she'd purchased from Replay Vintage, over the mannequin's arms. She was just swapping the coats out. If one of these coats was being thrown away, it should be that one. Her heart thudded in her chest. She knew it was wrong to take the coat without paying for it, even if they left it out in the alley like trash. Technically, she was stealing from them. But she needed this coat. It's not like she was doing it for a bad reason, right? Surely they'd understand. Despite her sound reasoning, guilt sloshed in her gut. Quickly, before she could change her mind, she started down the alley away from the store. It was getting darker and hard to see. Mrs. Smith would worry if she didn't turn up at home soon. A cackling laugh rang out behind her. Delia froze. Slowly, she turned around toward the back of the store. It was almost closing time, and all the shops were shutting down for the day. The alley was deserted, except for the mannequin wearing the puffer coat over by the dumpster. She was just convincing herself she'd imagined it, when the laugh sounded again, louder this time, making Delia flinch. It seemed to be emanating from the mannequin's plastic face. Even though the lips remained frozen, the mannequin's black eyes seemed to bore into her as it laughed and laughed and laughed. Without thinking, Delia turned and fled down the alley, clutching the Corella coat close to her chest. The soft coat encased her body. She knew that taking the garment was wrong, terribly wrong. That was probably why she'd imagined that eerie laughter. Not to mention it was getting dark and harder to see. Her eyes were probably playing tricks on her. But even so, guilt mixed with fear churned in her gut. She should go back and return it. She had to. But instead, she clutched the coat even tighter, melting away her guilt. As she ran down the alley, heading for the train station, she was certain of one thing. She needed this coat.